And again, it was fine to stuff and avoid as a kid when it's a cute, furry little monkey, but now do that same concept, that same survival coping mechanism as, for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. And now that cute, furry little monkey is now King Kong. It's an 800-pound gorilla, or like Incredible Hulk, who you're not in control of. When King Kong comes out, when the Hulk comes out, you're no longer in control. Welcome to the EQ for Entrepreneurs podcast. Like most business owners, you already know you need good business and marketing strategies to scale and be profitable. But at some point, you've hit the dreaded wall where you feel stuck and frustrated. EQ for Entrepreneurs is for business owners and leaders who are honest enough to admit that they just might be the ones holding their business back and are brave enough to change that.
We're Noble and Kathy, and every week we're having candid conversations about all things emotional intelligence and how growing that has allowed us to get out of our own way and is radically transforming both our businesses and our personal lives. This is the secret sauce strategy for modern entrepreneurs who are tired of hustling without seeing results and want to grow a business and a life that they love.
What is going on, entrepreneurs, leaders, and influencers? So Noble here and super excited to go over episode 49 with you, the emotional growth journey hack community. So I feel like being able to grow in community is going to be a tremendous benefit and advantage for those of you all that are wanting to be serious about taking on your emotional growth journey. Who are we? What are we all about? We love helping entrepreneurs navigate the emotional journey of running their life and business. All right. For those of you all watching on YouTube, I've got my notes in front of me. You're going to see me scrolling and stuff. And for those of you on the podcast, or just checking it out audio-wise, too easy, it'll be irrelevant to you about me scrolling and looking down at my notes. If you have not had an opportunity yet to check out our taco quiz. What? Yes, taco quiz, y'all. Big Poppy is in to tacos. I am seriously into tacos. There's a whole story about it. In fact, the link to a video of why I'm into tacos is actually in that taco quiz. You can find that quiz by going to eqforentrepreneurs.com/taco quiz. eqforentrepreneurs.com/taco quiz. I have 5 points that I'm going to cover today. I'm going to cover a couple stories first, and then we'll jump into the actual 5 points that I feel are a reason why it's so important. It's such a benefit to be able to learn and grow in this emotional growth experience in community. But first, some stories. So why is this whole emotional growth journey important? Let's start at 10,000 feet. Why is it important? And some of y'all may be listening to this episode for your first time and have not checked out any other episodes. So just some quick background. Increasing your emotional intelligence will help you be more effective entrepreneur, family member, friend, leader, and ultimately decision maker. And regardless of what you do in whichever those spaces are, becoming a more effective decision maker is going to add tremendous value, 10, 20, 30x value in all of those spaces, all of those arenas. It's like, I'm going to use a military analogy here. So just that's why I'm going to use an analogy about a weapon system. It's called an M240 Bravo. It's a big machine gun. And for those old school people, it's the new version. Well, it's not even new because now the M240 is even old, but it's like the M60. It's like the old Rambo M60 gun. It's just the newer version of that. But again, even the M240 Bravo is not new anymore. So it's like handing an M240 Bravo big machine gun to somebody who has no idea how to use weapons, who has no idea how to use a machine gun, who has no idea how to use the M240. And for example, my wife, not knowing your EQ is the equivalent of handing a very effective, very powerful, very useful weapon system like a 240 to somebody that has no idea how to use it. In this scenario, you are the weapon system. You are that tool. And if you don't know your tool very well, you don't know your weapon system very well, how effective are you going to do in the arena, right? In the military, we'd say combat, but in the business world, we'd say business. How effective can you be if you don't know yourself in the combat environment of business, of social media, of marketing, of influence? To use a non-military analogy, it's like a car, like a stick shift or manual transmission vehicle. Imagine getting behind the car. Maybe some of you don't know how to drive a stick shift. How effective would you be? And let's say it's a super nice automobile, but it's a stick shift. How effective would that automobile be to you? How useful would that automobile be to you if you don't know how to drive a stick shift? Or maybe a young person who doesn't know how to drive a stick, or there are a lot of folks nowadays obviously don't know how to drive a stick shift. And so how effective would the automobile be? It wouldn't be effective. Well, in this analogy, you are the automobile. If you don't know how to drive yourself, right? You don't know how to operate your stick shift. You don't know how to operate your automobile. Or a Tesla, right? A Tesla, man, a fancy Tesla. I've heard it's a super, high speed computer system in there, all that stuff. If you don't know how to operate it, how effective is that Tesla going to be to you or for you? It's not going to be, is the bottom line, right? Same thing with our emotional intelligence. I just had a gentleman on LinkedIn, a CEO of a company, pose a question about implicit bias and how implicit bias negatively impacts people during the interview process, and really throughout business, throughout the private sector, not just the private sector, but I even made a comment about implicit bias in the military, being a West Point grad. And I said, well, I wonder what the relationship is between emotional intelligence and implicit bias. And he asked a question back. He's like, man, can you elaborate on EQ? He's like, I'm not even familiar with what emotional intelligence is. Like, can you give me some background? And it was in the Harvard Business Review section of LinkedIn. So I was like, wow, right. So me being in this space for and I say for so long, it's only been 3 years. There are still so many people that are not familiar with or understand the power of our own emotions. And the crazy thing is, la-di-da-di, everybody's got them, right? We all have emotions and feelings. Even the most logical, sequential thinker, the most the most process-oriented, the most logical thinker, still, and the most unemotional person that you can think of, still has emotions and feelings. So to not be aware of them, to not know how to effectively use them, apply them, implement them. Now, the goal is to not be controlled by them. And that was me. I was definitely in that category. I was in the category of when my emotions slammed, right? If my adrenaline hit or I got really emotional, man, my logical side of my brain would just completely shut off and my emotions were completely in control. That's also not the goal. So awareness does not mean control. It's actually the opposite. Becoming aware of your emotions, becoming aware of your weapon system, becoming aware of how to drive your automobile will make you more effective as a leader, as an influencer, as an entrepreneur. Okay. So the last episode was on that I had here in the podcast here was on feeling like a miserable loser. And that may not relate to you, resonate, or apply to you, but for me, man, it is something that I have struggled with for, I'd say at least a decade, probably maybe a decade and a half. And it was the first time I went live on Facebook from my personal Facebook page and was literally in the middle of this valley sharing how I was feeling in the middle of that valley. It's very raw, very transparent. I was on a run, or in my case, in my days now, I do airborne shuffles. It's not so much a run anymore. So, but that was the last episode. Okay, here's the deal. This episode on a growth hack, right? Which is, again, growing in this emotional growth journey with community. The emotional growth journey is an individual journey that can be tremendously impacted and benefited by and blessed by community and association. So a couple stories, how I started my personal growth journey, EQ growth journey was this. I've been unaware of my emotions for my entire life, literally since my childhood days of my family. And again, I love my parents. My dad died, 10, 11 years ago. Wonderful dad. I have a wonderful mom. She's amazing. This is just a dynamic that was part of my family. And this is all my parents knew. So I'm not trying to bust out my parents. We all have stuff we got to work on as parents. This is just one of those areas for them. In our house, all I knew was whoever yelled the loudest won that conversation or that conflict. From the time I can remember. So from the time I was born, popped out of the womb, airborne, and until I left the house, 18, however old I was, 19, whatever, we yelled. That's how we resolve conflict. And I didn't know that was not normal. I didn't realize that was not how everyone resolved conflict. Even though obviously I spent the night at some of my buddies' houses, when I was a kid throughout the years. But still, I didn't realize that other families didn't yell at each other to solve problems. And what happened was, after we'd yell at each other, we would stomp off into our respective corners of our house and come back, 10 minutes later, 30 minutes later, an hour later, and act like nothing happened. We would just get done yelling and screaming at each other. I mean, legit yelling and screaming, cussing each other out, telling some very, very, very hurtful things, and literally come back sometime later and say, hey, so what's for dinner? Hey, what'd you think of the Cubs game? Hey, what'd you think of, how's the weather today? Whatever, right? We just would literally act like nothing happened. Well, what that trained, and it's fine to stuff and avoid emotions as a kid. It was fine, right? It was a little kid. I didn't know any other way, but we would never talk about or discuss our emotions or feelings ever. So even though as a kid, I'd feel these intense, anger and rejection and frustration and disappointment and sadness and, very intense emotions. But we never talk about it. We would never talk about it. We never even, nothing. So zero conflict resolution, zero discussion about feelings and emotions. And again, it was fine to stuff and avoid as a kid when it's a cute, furry little monkey. But now do that same concept, that same survival coping mechanism as, for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. And now that cute, furry little monkey is now King Kong. It's an 800-pound gorilla, or like Incredible Hulk, who you're not in control of. When King Kong comes out, when the Hulk comes out, you're no longer in control, and you begin to hurt each other. And that's what happened about 5 years ago. Over the course of probably 2 to 4 weeks, I had yelled 3 separate times at my wife. And my wife's love language is quality time, and the dialect that she has is communication. And we are typically the most sensitive in the area of our love language. And so because her love language is communication, when I yelled at her 3 times, it was like I could not hurt her anymore. That was the absolute worst thing I could possibly do to her, right? So when you hurt somebody in their love language, well, I crushed her. When I yelled 3 times in 2 to 4 weeks during I call them intense family fellowships, or when we got angry at each other, IFS, right? And she's like, dude, she's like 3 things. 1, don't ever yell at me again. 2, you've never done this before. In our 20 years of being married, you've never yelled at me before. Number 3, you need help. Something's up. And I had to think about it. I was like, dang, I don't normally roll like this. I don't yell at her. So what's going on? What happened is pain and bitterness that's not transformed in your life will be transferred in your life. So all those little emotional injuries that you have had all the way through your childhood, all the way through adulthood, all those little emotional injuries that you haven't dealt with, that you haven't processed, that you haven't reflected on, that you haven't worked on, that you haven't healed from, are little teeny cracks in the foundation of your psyche, if you will. And you multiply those over the course of decades, and you're talking, boom, here comes the Hulk. And again, it's all fun and games, right? It's all fine and dandy as long as you can control it. But as soon as it starts to come out into areas of your life you're not able to control, that's when you start hurting people and yourself as well. Okay, so that's one of the ways I started into this whole EQ journey. So I was like, okay, I definitely need to get help in this area. Well, one of the benefits of how I have been growing in my emotional growth journey over the last 3 years. So phase one of my community, so talk, right, this is about growth hacks, emotional growth hacks, and in this case, through community. The beginning of my community was actually my wife. The cool thing is, because we both had so many issues in our lives, it was affecting our marriage, it was affecting our businesses, it was affecting every area of our lives, finances. And so we went to counseling, and we had this amazing counselor actually here in Colorado, amazing counselor who opened this whole door to us on emotional intelligence and emotional growth. Well, once we got exposed to this area, and because, Kathy and I've had a really good relationship over the past, 2 decades in terms of, we talk to each other a lot. I've learned a couple of years early on into our marriage about her love language being communication. So I really made it a point early on to really make that a priority and learn and grow in the area of communication. So we had that kind of foundation of communication. So she would ask me questions. So when I was stuck emotionally, if I had hit an emotional spot, a plateau, or I got so emotional, angry, upset, frustrated, but I was locked up and almost like an emotional Charlie horse, where I couldn't get out of my spin cycle, my emotional spin cycle. She would begin to ask me questions. Well, not would, but she's still to this day, literally to this day, asks me questions. Hey, Noble, so what are you feeling right now? And just the act of her asking me questions about logical, unemotional questions about my emotions has been game changer, critical in my emotional growth journey. So that's kind of phase one of my community is my wife. So having somebody in my life. Now, the other dynamic is she's also growth minded, which is a foundational thing for me. Is you got to be growth minded, man. If a fixed mindset, I feel so, sad and disappointed, and sometimes, some cases, frustrated, but more so sad with those people that, man, are just not growth minded. It's just like it's a Ferrari that is sitting in the garage. Right, it's you're in combat, and you've all have your M4, you've got your 45 on you, or your 9mm or whatever you have on you, but you keep them holstered. You don't even take them out of the holster, but you're going through life in combat with no weapon system, no tools, no, you know what I mean. So anyway, so that has been huge. Having access to a community, in this case, my wife, is phase one of the community, asking me some logical questions to help me unpack some of this stuff and think through some of the stuff unemotionally has been, again, game changer, absolutely life changing. The other experience now, okay, and just that first phase there of community, again, with my wife, is the impact has been priceless. Not only in me personally, but in our marriage, in our parenting, finances, faith, fitness, every area it's impacting every area, our businesses, everything. Okay, another story about community, of how it has impacted me personally. 2.5-3 years ago, I had this thing where I'm a big people person, love people. Since I, again, came out of the womb, man, just all about people. But to a fault, though, because I'm a recovering people pleaser addict. So, there's every strength can also be a weakness. That's free tacos right there. Every strength can also be a weakness. So, because I love people so much and I love learning, well, what's a combination between learning and people, and also business and stuff? And so I thought, well, man, this one particular business that we were in, you're only able to help people that choose to pursue the particular type of business vehicle that we were in at the time. And you were not encouraged to really help out anybody else outside of that. But I still wanted to. For me, I want to help as many people out as possible. Well, I thought a few years ago, well, man, if I could help out as many people as I wanted to, how would I do it? 3 years ago, I started doing webinars on various topics. And I said, well, man, I wonder if other people love learning and leadership as much as I do. So 3 years ago, I threw it out and I was just going to do it for some of my buddies that were men, just to start off with as a beta test. Let me just see if any other dudes are into growing in leadership. And, I wanted to do it on being better husbands and fathers and men and leaders and brothers and uncles and dads and, grandparents and all that kind of stuff. And I just put out to my little circle, 90 men signed up for this. And I thought, wow, okay, I was stoked. I was, really excited about that. Only 60 people showed up. 60 guys showed up, half virtual, half in my house, and 30 guys didn't show up. And they all reached out, man, Noble, sorry about that, work, whatever the thing was. But they said, hey, did you record it by any chance? And I said, yeah, absolutely. So boom. I said, but I don't have the gift of administration or the strength of administration. And so I said, hey guys, look, I'm not going to email you all this content because it's going to wear me out. So I'm just going to create a Facebook group and you guys can all go to the Facebook group and get access to all the content. Well, about a week later, a lot of those wives started to reach out to me from those 30 men. Well, actually not from the 30 men, but from the 60 men that attended. A lot of the wives reached out to me and said, hey, what do we lunch meet? Like, I want to check out growing leadership and I'm growth minded too. Like, what's up? I want to come to the next one. Well, the next webinar we did was on work-life balance. And anyway, that's a whole nother deal. But from that, I started a thing called the 360 Movement Personal Growth Tribe on Facebook because I had seen some of my classmates, some of my friends be successful financially, but not in their family. I saw them be successful professionally, but not personally. So I wanted to create a community where we could grow in all 360 degrees of life, not just, hey, look, I'm a SME, a subject matter expert in this area or that area, but man, I'm successful in every area. And for the, my faith background is I'm a Christian, and I'm like, man, I want to set a good example, right? As somebody who loves the Lord, I want to be a good example in every area of my life, not just one area. Or, which also happens here too is, oh, look, I can walk on water and I'm this ninja faster and I'm holier than, Swiss cheese or whatever, but my family's eating ramen noodles every night. I didn't want that either, right? I wanted to be a good example in every area of my life, not just in one particular area of my life. And so that kind of boom, the 360 Personal Growth Tribe was born. And I tell you, the value of being able to grow in community over the past 3 years in the 360 Movement Personal Growth Tribe has been phenomenal. Now, here's why. So I broke that down. I did some reflection. Why has it been so cool to be a part of this growth community, this growth tribe? And in there's so much great content. I've got I don't have all the talks uploaded yet, but most of the talks of the seminars, webinars that we've done over the past 3 years in a document in that Facebook group, from a bunch of colonels, a bunch of entrepreneurs, just a ton of successful people, some keynote presentations, a lot of great content in there that's been really, really neat. So I reflected on that. Why has it been helpful for me to grow in the area of, in this community? So now here's the deal. I'm going to start reading off some emotions here, and pay attention to your own emotions as I'm reading off these emotions, and see if there are any of the emotions that I read off that resonate with you, that jump out at you like a 3D movie and really grab you by the throat and really resonate with you. And write those down and maybe explore those emotions further. Why? Why did this emotion and that emotion jump out at you the most? What was it about that emotion that resonated the most with you? And why is that important? Because it will help increase your own self-awareness, which is one of the 4 components of emotional intelligence. Okay, so this journey, so this whole why community or why emotional growth and community, and I haven't hit the 5 points yet. I'm going to get to those here in a second. The journey, this emotional growth journey is already, y'all, it is already uncomfortable. It's potentially overwhelming. Now, understand the grid. Understand why I have come up with this list, this particular list of emotions. And the reason why I'm reading you this list of emotions is because of my grid, my context to this story, where I told you that I have been emotionally clueless. The emotional EQ clue bus is driven by my house for 2 decades. No, I mean for 4 decades. And I've missed it every time. So this is why these are the emotions that I'm saying about this emotional growth journey. I did not grow up in a family where we sat down and discussed, emotions and feelings and emotional intelligence and emotional growth and that kind of thing. So, and even in my faith walk, man, I've been a Christian since I was 8 years old. So again, for decades. And do you know how many times I have heard about the discussion of emotions and feelings at any church that I've been to in 4 decades? One. So one church for 4 weeks, and that is it. And that was last year. So this is not, though it's not a new topic, EQ is not necessarily a new subject, a new concept. It's still, I am just finding there are only 2 groups of people that are aware about this stuff, aware of EQ, and that's the C-level, C-suite folks, CEOs, CFOs, CIOs, COOs, right? Chief executive officers and chief operations officers and all that kind of stuff. And the academic folks, a lot of, so there are a number of academic folks that are familiar with the concept of EQ, but I found a lot of people in between are not that familiar with the power of emotional intelligence. So this journey of emotional growth is already uncomfortable, potentially overwhelming if you're coming at it from, again, as an emotional kindergartner, if you will. Scary, nervous, new. You can experience disappointment in this journey. Maybe you feel like you're not growing fast enough, or you feel like you're going backwards, or it's too hard, it's too slow, it's too overwhelming. It can be exciting. It can be hopeful, exhausting, exposing, raw, unknown, terrifying, hard, difficult, challenging, confusing. There are layers to emotions. It's not linear. I mean, it is literally very much like learning a new language, because it is. It's a whole new language. It can be frustrating. Okay? This journey, this emotional growth journey, requires courage, the desire to grow and change and improve. You got to be teachable. You got to be coachable. Humility, honesty, vulnerability, transparency, and yeah, man, I got something else to share here in a little bit if I get to it. Bravery, strength, stamina, endurance, love, patience, grace, forgiveness, encouragement, discipline, drive, safety. And you are listening to somebody, I'm telling y'all, you are listening to somebody who 20 years ago, I was an infantry officer in the 82nd Airborne Division out of Fort Bragg, North Carolina, airborne ranger, jump master, all that stuff. And if you had talked to me as I was an infantry platoon leader and sat me down and said, hey, bro, we're going to talk about your emotions and feelings, I would have probably punched you in your jaw. I would have throat punched you, like, dude, don't cuss in front of me, right? Feelings and emotions, like, I ain't got time for that. Number one, I have no idea what those 2 things are. Number 2, I don't want to talk about it. Let's talk about tactics, techniques, and procedures. Let's talk about TTPs. I don't need warm fuzzy stuff. I need hard skills here. But what's crazy is, after all my research in the past 3 years of researching this stuff, there is absolutely a direct impact to your business bottom line, your life bottom line, your performance bottom line, whether you're in the military, you're in business, you're in corporate America, I don't care where you're at, what industry, what space you're in. Your emotional intelligence or lack thereof absolutely directly impacts how you perform, how well you do your job, how well you influence, and how well you do business, how well you think, all that stuff. EQ is tied up in all of it. And so for us, we want to create and are creating a community of folks that are all working on and growing our emotional intelligence, so that all kind of have experienced those two sets of big emotions that I just laid out to you guys. We launch our membership site to this kind of group, this membership, next month. So for those of you that would like to be on a wait list, man, please check out eqforentrepreneurs.com/the growth lab. eqforentrepreneurs.com/the growth lab. And check it out and get on the wait list there. Now, here are the 5 benefits of growing your EQ in community. Number 1, let me just tell you the 5 real quick, and then I'm going to break them down. Relationships, language, awareness, relatability and encouragement, and accountability. And I've got relatability and encouragement on the same line there. That's number 4. So again, the 5 things are relationships, language, awareness, relatability and encouragement, and accountability. So let me break those down. Relationships. We are all wired for relationships. Now, some have different emotional, relational bandwidths, right? Some of you, like for my wife, she has 2 or 3 close friends, and they're deep, and that's it. I have 5 to 10. I call them tier 1 friends. We're super close friends. And then probably 10 or 15, another 10 or 15 that are in my tier 2 that I don't talk to as much, but I still talk to, periodically. And that's fine, right? There's no right or wrong. My wife's not right and I'm wrong, and I'm not right and she's wrong. It's just some people have different emotional, relational capacities, and that's fine. Are you aware of what you are? Because that's helpful, right? Every little step of awareness, man, is helpful. Okay. So that's number 1 is relationships. We're all wired and designed for relationships. Number 2 is language. Honestly, part of this EQ journey is just learning the language of emotions. And that may sound cheesy to you. I don't know. And again, some of the stuff may be like, dude, are you serious? This is where you're at. Yeah, this is where I have been for most of my entire life. I have stuffed and avoided for my entire life until I started this emotional growth journey. So I had to learn a language. But here's the thing, is just like learning anything new, there's a certain language associated with that topic. And that is part of the learning process, which I'm going to explain here in a second. Some of the new things that I've had to go through the same process with, and here's the process. Actually, I learned this. It's the classical model of learning, which we all do, but we just don't. I didn't realize there was a name for it. I learned it from our homeschool program that we use. It's called Classical Conversations, and the learning model is the classical model, which is the trivium, right? And that's a fancy Latin term for 3 roads or 3 paths. It goes grammar's at the bottom. So you have to learn the grammar, which is the foundation. Then you become dialectic, where you start making connections. You start making their relationships to the grammar. Well, how does this word go with that word? And how does that word connect into that word? And what is this word? How does this word relate with this word, right? So it's understanding the relationships or concepts. What is a concept? The dialectic is this concept. How does this concept tie in with that concept? And which concept has to come first, and how are they related? And and then the rhetorical level, right? So you got the grammar phase, again, is the foundation. The dialectic phase. So grammar phase is like the roots of a tree trunk. The dialectic phase is the tree trunk, and then the rhetorical phase is the fruit, is the apples on the tree, for example. So grammar, dialectic, and rhetoric. So there's a learning process for everything. And in every process, in every topic you want to learn about, the grammar phase is the first phase that we all have to go through. And here are some of those areas, some of the topics that I have had to go through this exact same process. So this, again, point number 2, language or grammar phase. I had my faith. I've had to, go through that learning process of my faith. Homeschooling. What's the grammar of homeschooling? What's the grammar or language of faith? What's the grammar or language of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, of emotional intelligence in this case, of online marketing, which I've had, been learning about, membership sites, which we're, learning about and launching again next month, starting a podcast. This is, we're only into this is episode 49. So halfway to 100, starting a podcast. I had to learn the grammar, the language of podcasting. So in this case, learning the language of EQ is great in community because you've got more people speaking the language, more people speaking the different grammar, the different words there. So in other words, just using a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu analogy or a martial arts analogy, is that you will be a white belt in your EQ journey for a little bit of time, and that's fine. It may be 6 months, maybe a year, maybe 5 years that you're maybe a white belt before you transition to that next belt, and that's fine. Your journey is your journey. Some of you, honestly, will probably grow faster than us. Man, it's funny. One of the guys, I got to tell you about this guy, Alex. There's a guy named Alex who's he was part of our founding members launch to be a part of our membership site that we're launching next month. So we did a founding members launch, a month or two ago, to kind of find out interest and check interest and stuff like that, to see if there was anyone that was even wanting to grow in this area. And this guy, Alex, from Australia, joined the group. And, part of the founding member launch benefits is we did one-on-one kind of connection or Zoom webinar with each one of the founding members. And this dude, Alex, when I said, hey, Alex, hey, man, tell me a little bit about your story. Tell me a little about your emotional growth journey. He was rattling off stuff. I was taking notes. After about 30 seconds, I'm like, oh my goodness, this dude knows way more about EQ than I do. And I started to take some mad copious notes. So there, many of you may be way further along in your emotional growth journey than I am, which is super cool, right? So you can add value to the group from a different perspective. You'll be able to add your wisdom and insights and encouragement and stuff to those community members that are maybe more like me, that are, on the early end of our journey, again, only being 3 years into this. So, but just be patient with it. But language is the second one. The third benefit of growing in community is awareness. Being in a community and hearing other people discuss this topic just increases awareness of the topic. You will start, the more you have it on your brain, the more you get exposed to it, the more you start to see it. It's like when you buy your first vehicle, and I think our first vehicle was a Chevy Blazer. That was our first vehicle when we first got married. And so what happens? Boom, we get the Chevy Blazer, and all of a sudden, everybody on the street evidently had a Chevy Blazer, and I never saw it before because I wasn't aware. As soon as I became aware, all of a sudden, I became more aware and started to see more Chevys, more Blazers, and so awareness. When the jiu-jitsu gyms were open, and some of them are opening back up and stuff, and just being, again, I'm only 3 years into my jiu-jitsu journey, and just hearing other instructors, every class I went to, hearing the language, right, getting aware, being around other jiu-jitsu folks, and hearing even the sidebar conversations and YouTube videos and Facebook groups on jiu-jitsu, just awareness. It's giving me more awareness of the language of emotions and feelings and emotional intelligence. And also, the other benefit of awareness, you're hearing from multiple people, multiple times, from multiple perspectives, share about the same topic. And I feel like when you get that through almost 360-degree, three-dimensional perspective about a topic, I think that's helpful and healthy. Number 4, relatability and encouragement. The fourth reason why I feel it's important or helpful to go through and grow through your emotional growth journey in community. Relatability and encouragement is number 4. Just knowing there are others in the journey with you, with some of those folks in that journey, in the same phase of your journey, is encouraging because their stories and their journey is relatable. And I tell you, I feel like, this is just my opinion, I haven't done research on this part here. I feel that there's catharsis, there's healing in relatability. I think that's called empathy, right? When you can empathize with somebody, just sharing the same space and realizing that. So that's one level of connection, right? Is just sharing the same space, but then sharing the same space with somebody that is in the same journey and the same phase of the journey as you is also super helpful. But then also within this community that we're, again, the EQ for Entrepreneurs membership community, there will be people they'll be further along than you, which is also, I feel, beneficial. So you'll be rolling, we call it rolling in jujitsu. You'll be rolling with higher belts in EQ, and then you'll be rolling with some lower belts in EQ, which is super fun, right? You'll have folks in all, but hearing from the white belts and the black belts and the brown belts and all these different levels of belts, you'll be able to learn and benefit from all of that discussion and conversation. And again, I feel like there's healing and growth just from relatability, and there's encouragement from relatability. And number 5 is accountability. And I love this analogy. I thought this analogy a while back that, think about right now as you're driving down the road, or you're working in the kitchen, or, whatever you're doing. You're at the gym, you're doing PT. And think of the top athletes in any field, the GOATs, right? The greatest of all time. Think about some names that you can in your head. Think about right now, just take a second. The greatest athletes that you can possibly think of. And I've got some here that I wrote down: Michael Jordan, LeBron James, Tiger Woods, Khabib Nurmagomedov, Amanda Nunes, Valentina Shevchenko, Rose Namajunas, Joanna Jędrzejczyk, Usain Bolt. Those are some UFC folks. I like watching mixed martial arts and stuff. Anyway, let's use business people: Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates, Warren Buffett. Think of some of the, Oprah, right? Some of the big baller business folks. Now, check this out. How many of them have coaches, trainers, consultants, advisors? All of them. All of them do. If the greatest athletes and business minds in the world know that they need to have that level of association and accountability in their lives to achieve max performance in their spaces, why don't you? And so, how many of you perform better with accountability in your job, in doing PT, exercising, physical training is PT, sorry, my military, their background. Do you perform better going to the gym alone or with a training partner? Doing jujitsu alone or with a training partner? Jujitsu, yes, there are tons of drills that you can do by yourself. I know for me, I just engage more when I've got somebody that I can roll with and drill with. So again, the 5 reasons why growing in community is a growth hack, is an emotional intelligence growth hack: relationships, language, awareness, relatability and encouragement, and accountability. I super duper hope you enjoyed this episode. Please rate, review, and subscribe to our podcast, YouTube channel, Facebook group. We love helping you navigate the emotional journey of running your life and your business. And be sure to check out eqforentrepreneurs.com/The Growth Lab to get on our wait list to join our community to help grow your emotional intelligence.